The crisp autumn air bit at Jerry's cheeks, painting them a rosy red. He loved this time of year, when the leaves turned into a riot of gold and crimson, and the forest whispered ancient secrets. Jerry was a man of the woods, through and through. Every fall, he packed his gear, kissed his wife goodbye, and headed deep into the vast wilderness of the Pacific Northwest. This year was no different. He drove his old pickup truck as far as the logging road would allow, then strapped on his heavy pack, grabbed his trusty rifle, and set off on foot. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, just the quiet solitude that only the deepest parts of the forest could offer. The scent of pine needles and damp earth filled his lungs, a smell he cherished more than any perfume. Jerry had been hunting since he was a boy, taught by his own father, who believed in respecting nature above all else. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. He knew how to move silently through the underbrush, how to read the tracks of deer and elk, and how to tell the time by the sun. He wasn't reckless, but he wasn't afraid either. The forest was his second home, a place of peace and challenge. Today, Jerry had walked further than usual. The sun was beginning its slow descent, casting long, dancing shadows through the trees. He found a small clearing beside a babbling brook, a perfect spot to rest and eat his sandwich. As he sat on a mossy log, munching on his lunch, he listened to the symphony of the forest. The chirping of unseen birds, the rustle of squirrels in the leaves, the gentle gurgle of the water. It was moments like these that made all the hard work worth it. After his meal, Jerry decided to explore a little further up a steep incline he hadn't noticed before. He figured there might be some good vantage points from up high. He carefully made his way, his boots crunching on fallen branches and loose rocks. The trees here were even older, their trunks thick and covered in emerald moss, their branches reaching up like gnarled fingers towards the sky. The light grew dimmer beneath the dense canopy, making the forest feel even more ancient and mysterious. He pushed aside a thick curtain of ferns, revealing a small, untouched grove. The air here was strangely still, almost heavy. A shiver ran down Jerry's spine, not from cold, but from an odd feeling he couldn't quite place. It was as if he had stepped into a place where time stood still, a secret corner of the world. He took a deep breath, his senses on high alert. He had always trusted his gut feelings in the woods, and right now, his gut was telling him something big was about to happen. He gripped his rifle a little tighter, not out of fear, but out of an instinct to be ready for anything. The strange stillness in the grove pressed in on Jerry. Every fiber of his being was alert, but he couldn't pinpoint why. There was no sound, no movement, just that heavy, waiting silence. He took another step forward, his rifle still clutched in his hand, ready for a deer, a bear, anything that might be hiding in the shadows. But this feeling was different from encountering any animal he knew. It was older, deeper. Suddenly, without warning, a colossal force slammed into his right leg. It wasn't a trip, not a stumble. It was a direct, powerful grab. Jerry gasped, the air rushing from his lungs as he was yanked off his feet with unbelievable strength. His rifle flew from his grasp, clattering against a tree trunk before falling into a pile of leaves. He hit the ground hard, the impact jarring every bone in his body. For a moment, he lay there, stunned, trying to understand what had just happened. He scrambled to push himself up, his heart pounding like a drum against his ribs. His mind raced, trying to process the impossible. What kind of animal could do that? A bear might swipe, but this was a firm, deliberate hold. He twisted his head, trying to see his leg, and that's when he saw it. or rather felt it. Wrapped around his calf was something enormous, covered in thick, coarse hair. It felt like a hand, but a hand so large it could easily encircle his entire leg. The grip was incredibly strong, yet not crushing. It was a hold designed to control, not to injure. A wave of pure, primal terror washed over Jerry. He had heard the stories, the whispered tales around campfires, but he had always dismissed them as old wives' tales. Now, face to face with the undeniable truth, he knew. This wasn't a bear. This wasn't any animal he had ever encountered in all his years in the woods. This was something else entirely. Before he could even scream, before he could fully comprehend the monstrous limb clamped around him, he felt himself being pulled. The forest floor, covered in leaves and twigs, scraped against his back as he was dragged across the ground. Panic flared, hot and sharp. He thrashed, trying to kick, trying to twist free. But the grip was unyielding. It held him fast, pulling him deeper into the untouched grove, away from the small clearing, away from his fallen rifle, away from anything familiar. He could only see glimpses of thick, dark fur and the blurred green and brown of the forest floor rushing past his eyes. The sheer power of whatever had him was astonishing. He felt like a toy, effortlessly moved by an invisible, giant hand. His breath came in ragged gasps, not just from the rough ride, but from the chilling realization that he was utterly helpless. The unseen force continued to pull Jerry, a relentless, powerful drag across the forest floor. He felt the rough texture of bark and stone against his back, heard the tearing of leaves and the snapping of small twigs. His mind was a jumble of fear and disbelief. This was real. The stories were real. He was being dragged by Bigfoot. The thought was so outlandish, so impossible. Yet here he was, living it. What struck him, even through his terror, was the strange gentleness of the movement. He was being pulled swiftly, yes, but not carelessly. The creature wasn't slamming him into trees or dropping him over rocks. It seemed to be navigating the rough terrain with an uncanny precision, avoiding the worst obstacles. He scraped his elbow once, and a small cut opened on his cheek from a low-hanging branch. But these were minor injuries. There was no bone-crushing force, no twisting of his limb that would suggest an intent to harm. It was as if the creature knew exactly where he was, what he was, and how much force to use. He couldn't see much, just a blur of green and brown as he was hauled along. The hairy hand around his leg remained firm, a warm, earthy smell coming from it. It wasn't unpleasant, just wild, like wet fur and damp soil. Jerry tried to scream again, but only a choked sound escaped his throat. His lungs burned, his muscles ached from tensing. But still, he was pulled onward, deeper and deeper into the unknown heart of the ancient forest. Minutes stretched into what felt like an eternity. He passed under giant ferns that brushed against his face, past towering cedar trees whose roots snaked across the ground like ancient serpents. The light grew even fainter here, the canopy so thick that only dappled rays of sunlight managed to pierce through, making the world around him feel shadowed and mysterious. He wondered where he was being taken, what fate awaited him. Was this creature going to take him to its lair? Was he going to be a meal? But then again, if it wanted to hurt him, it surely would have done so by now. The lack of violent intent was the most puzzling part. He could feel the subtle shifts in the ground beneath him, the creature expertly maneuvering around obstacles. It was moving uphill now, the ascent gradual but steady. The air grew cooler, and he noticed a faint, earthy smell, different from the general forest scent. It was like damp rock and something else, something wild and animalistic. but not truly foul. He was being pulled into what felt like the very soul of the wilderness, a place few, if any, human beings had ever set foot. The sheer scale of the creature's power was breathtaking, but its careful handling of him was even more so. It was an enigma, a puzzle wrapped in a shroud of thick, dark fur. The strange journey continued, the rhythmic pull of the unseen creature becoming a terrifying part of Jerry's reality. His initial panic began to mix with a growing sense of confusion. If this massive being wanted him dead, it could have crushed him in an instant. It could have thrown him against a tree or snapped his leg. But it hadn't. The grip around his calf, while firm and inescapable, remained consistent, never tightening to inflict pain. Jerry's mind, despite the fear, started to process this crucial detail. He had bumped and scraped, sure, but nothing serious. His backpack was still on, though probably a mess. His rifle was long gone, but he hadn't been disarmed violently. He was simply being moved. The realization, slow at first, then blooming into clarity, was astonishing. This wasn't an attack. This was a forced escort. He tried to shift his head to get a better look, to catch even a glimpse of his captor. All he could see was a wall of dark, shaggy fur that seemed to belong to an impossibly large leg. The sheer size of the creature was immense. He could feel its powerful muscles working with each stride, the ground trembling slightly with its footsteps, even as it walked with surprising stealth. As he was dragged, Jerry began to notice a pattern in the creature's movements. It seemed to be following a faint trail, one that only something intimately familiar with the forest could navigate. It moved around thickets of thorny bushes, over large fallen logs, and through narrow gaps between boulders. It was as if the creature had a destination in mind, a specific place it needed to take him. And it needed him there in one piece. The air grew even cooler, carrying with it a distinct, earthy smell. Stronger now, mingled with a faint, damp scent. He heard the distant sound of water, not a brook like the one he'd rested by, but something more echoing, as if from an enclosed space. The light from the setting sun was almost entirely blocked out now, leaving the forest in a deep twilight. A strange calm began to settle over Jerry, pushing aside some of the raw terror. He was still scared, more scared than he had ever been in his life. But the fear was now tinged with a profound curiosity. Why him? Why was he being taken? What did this creature want? He had always thought Bigfoot was a myth, a scary story. Now he was a part of that story, being pulled along by a legend. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting out a shaky breath. He was no longer just a hunter in the woods. He was an unwilling passenger on an incredible journey, and his life was about to take a turn he could never have imagined. The creature wasn't trying to kill him. It was trying to show him something. The damp, earthy smell grew stronger, and the sound of echoing water became clearer. Jerry knew he was being taken somewhere enclosed, a place hidden from the outside world. The creature's powerful strides slowed slightly, and the dragging motion became more deliberate, guiding him around a final cluster of dense evergreen bushes. Then, with a final, gentle tug, Jerry was released. He lay still for a moment, catching his breath, his eyes adjusting to the even deeper gloom. As he pushed himself up, he gasped softly. He was no longer in the open forest. Before him loomed a gaping black mouth in the side of a massive rock face. It was a cave, hidden away behind a natural curtain of thick foliage and ancient, moss-covered boulders. The entrance was surprisingly large, easily big enough for a creature of immense size to walk through, upright. The air coming from inside was cool and carried that unique scent of damp earth and something wild, but not threatening. Jerry could dimly make out the rough, uneven walls of the cave, disappearing into darkness. He turned his head slowly, fear mixing with awe. Standing over him, barely visible in the dim light, was the creature that had dragged him. It was truly enormous, far taller than any man, covered from head to foot in thick, dark brown fur that seemed to blend perfectly with the shadows. Its eyes, he thought he could see them, were large and dark, watching him with an intelligence that sent another shiver down his spine. It was Bigfoot beyond a shadow of a doubt. The legend was real, standing right in front of him. The Bigfoot made a low, rumbling sound deep in its chest. It wasn't a growl of anger, but more like a deep, questioning hum. Then it gently nudged Jerry with its foot, not harshly, but a clear signal for him to move. It wanted him to go into the cave. Jerry's heart hammered. His hunter's instinct screamed at him to run, to escape. But the creature had shown him no harm. It had brought him here with a purpose. He remembered the feeling of being gently moved, the careful navigation, the lack of violence. Taking a shaky breath, he pushed himself fully upright, his legs a little stiff from the rough ride. He looked at the massive creature, then at the dark mouth of the cave. He had come this far. There was no turning back now. With a deep swallow, Jerry stepped forward, moving into the unknown depths of the hidden cave, following the silent command of the forest's greatest mystery. The Bigfoot watched him enter, then followed, its massive form disappearing into the darkness behind him. The air inside the cave was cool and still, carrying the scent of damp earth and something wild, yet comforting, like an animal's den. Jerry took a tentative step deeper, his eyes slowly adjusting to the dimness. The Bigfoot followed him, its massive form filling the entrance, blocking out most of the remaining twilight from outside. Only faint slivers of light found their way in, painting the rough cave walls in shades of gray. Then a soft whimpering sound echoed from further within the cave. It wasn't a growl, not an animal's snarl. It was a cry, small and mournful, filled with pain. Jerry's heart, which had been racing from fear and wonder, now softened with a different emotion: pity. The Bigfoot nudged him again, this time with a clear sense of urgency. Jerry understood. He carefully picked his way over the uneven rock floor, drawn by the sound. As he moved deeper, the whimpering grew louder. And then he saw it. Nestled in a hollow against the cave wall, curled into a tight ball, was a smaller version of the massive creature that had brought him here. It was a baby Bigfoot, covered in the same thick, dark fur. But its eyes, when it looked up at Jerry, were wide and filled with tears. Its face was scrunched up in distress, and its tiny hands, much like the larger one that had held his leg, trembled. The whimpering turned into a soft, consistent cry, like a child in pain. Jerry's hunter's instincts, which usually focused on tracking and observation, were replaced by a primal human response to help something hurt and afraid. He knelt down slowly, trying not to scare the little creature. It looked so small and vulnerable, despite its wildness. The large Bigfoot moved closer, its vast shadow falling over Jerry and the baby. It let out a soft huff, a sound that seemed to hold both concern and a desperate plea. It gestured with a huge, surprisingly gentle finger-like appendage towards the baby's leg. Jerry carefully shifted his gaze to the baby Bigfoot's leg. It was awkwardly bent, and he could see a dark, angry-looking spot just above its ankle. The fur was matted around the area, and the baby whimpered again as he looked. It was clearly in pain, and it was clear why the large Bigfoot had brought him here. It wasn't to kill him or even to scare him. It was to ask for help. A wave of understanding washed over Jerry, replacing all the terror with a profound sense of purpose. He was here to heal. Kneeling before the injured baby Bigfoot, Jerry felt a profound shift within him. The fear that had gripped him for so long melted away, replaced by a surge of compassion. The adult Bigfoot stood silently behind him, its large shadow a constant, watchful presence. Its soft huffs and gestures made its intentions unmistakably clear. It wanted Jerry, the human, to help its young. Jerry looked from the whimpering baby to the massive parent. The intelligent gaze of the adult Bigfoot held a desperate trust, a silent plea that transcended species. It was a parent's love for its child, raw and universal, reaching out to him across the vast divide. This wasn't a monster. It was a father or a mother, seeking aid for its hurt offspring. "Okay," Jerry whispered, his voice a little hoarse in the quiet cave. "Okay, I'll try." He slowly extended a hand towards the baby Bigfoot, moving with extreme care. The baby flinched slightly, its tear-filled eyes wide, but it didn't pull away. It seemed to sense Jerry's gentle intent. Or perhaps the reassuring presence of its parent was enough. Jerry's fingers, calloused from years of outdoor work, carefully parted the thick fur around the injured leg. The adult Bigfoot leaned closer, a low rumble vibrating in its chest, not threatening, but full of worry. Jerry felt its warm breath on the back of his neck, a strange mix of wildness and concern. He understood the immense trust placed in him. This creature, powerful enough to snap him in half, was allowing him, a complete stranger, to touch its most vulnerable family member. He gently touched the swollen area on the baby's leg. It was hot to the touch, and the baby whimpered again, pulling its leg back a little. The adult Bigfoot let out a soft, warning huff, but Jerry didn't stop. He looked up at the large creature, meeting its gaze, a silent promise in his eyes. He wouldn't hurt the baby. He would help. The big creature seemed to understand. It quieted, though its powerful presence remained. Jerry knew he had to be quick, gentle, and effective. He didn't have a first aid kit, not anymore. His backpack, with all its useful tools, was still outside somewhere, wherever he had been dragged from. He would have to rely on his instincts, his knowledge of the woods, and whatever meager resources he had on him. His mind raced, recalling every minor injury he'd treated on himself or his hunting dogs over the years. This was different, but the basic principles of care remained. He took a steadying breath and focused on the task at hand. The Bigfoot, a silent guardian, watched his every move. With a steadying breath, Jerry focused his attention on the baby Bigfoot's leg. The little creature still whimpered softly, its large, dark eyes fixed on him, full of both fear and a glimmer of hope. The adult Bigfoot remained a silent sentinel behind them, its presence a powerful mix of protection and anticipation. Jerry knew a thing or two about bumps and scrapes. Growing up in the countryside and spending his life in the outdoors meant he'd seen his share of minor injuries, both on himself and the animals he cared for. He'd patched up cuts, cleaned out splinters, and even set a bird's broken wing once with some clever splinting. He wasn't a doctor, but he was resourceful and had a good eye for what looked wrong. He gently parted the thick, coarse fur on the baby's lower leg. The fur was a rich, dark brown, almost black in the dim light of the cave. Beneath it, the skin was a surprisingly pale, grayish color, contrasting sharply with the inflamed, reddish area around the injury. He could feel the warmth radiating from the spot, a clear sign of trouble. The baby Bigfoot flinched and let out another soft cry as Jerry's fingers brushed against the swollen area. The adult Bigfoot responded with a low, worried rumble, a sound that vibrated through the cave floor. Jerry looked up, offering a reassuring nod to the giant creature. "Easy there," he murmured, more to himself than to the Bigfoot. "Just looking." He carefully moved his fingers over the swollen ankle, trying to feel for any broken bones, any obvious twists. The baby Bigfoot was tense, but it didn't pull away completely, seemingly understanding that Jerry was trying to help. His fingers traced the outline of the swelling, noting that it wasn't a clean break, or at least it didn't feel like one. There was no unnatural bend, no sharp edges of bone poking out. Then his gaze sharpened on a tiny, dark speck, almost hidden amidst the matted fur and reddened skin. It was small, no bigger than his thumbnail, but it looked out of place. It was a shard of something, dark and pointed, sticking out from the baby's skin. A splinter, a really big one. A sense of relief washed over Jerry, quickly followed by a renewed determination. A splinter, while painful, was something he knew how to deal with. It explained the swelling, the pain, and the way the baby was holding its leg. This wasn't a broken bone, which would have been much harder to treat without proper tools. This was something he could fix. He glanced up at the watchful parent, a plan already forming in his mind. Seeing the splinter, Jerry felt a rush of focused energy. This was something he could handle, even without his usual tools. He knew it would hurt the baby Bigfoot, but it was the only way to make it better. He looked up at the adult Bigfoot, its eyes still fixed on him, a silent question in their depths. Jerry nodded slowly, a silent promise. He needed something to grip the splinter. His fingers, though strong, might not be enough for such a large, deeply embedded shard. He scanned the cave floor in the dim light. There were small rocks, bits of wood, but nothing suitable. Then his eyes landed on his own belt buckle. It was a sturdy, metal buckle, just thin enough to potentially get under the edge of the splinter. Carefully, Jerry unbuckled his belt, the soft click echoing in the cave. The adult Bigfoot shifted, a low, questioning rumble in its chest. But Jerry just held up the buckle, trying to convey his intent. He hoped it understood. He knelt closer to the baby Bigfoot, talking to it in a soft, soothing voice. "It's okay, little one. Just a quick pull. It'll feel better soon." He knew the words meant nothing to the creature, but the tone might. He gently held the baby's leg still with one hand, bracing it carefully. The baby whimpered, sensing what was about to happen. With his other hand, Jerry positioned the edge of the metal buckle against the splinter. He took a deep breath. This had to be quick and clean. He pressed down firmly, sliding the edge under the exposed tip of the splinter. The baby Bigfoot let out a sharp cry, a sound of pain that tugged at Jerry's heart. The adult Bigfoot let out a louder, distressed rumble, taking a step forward. "Almost done," Jerry called out, working fast. With a swift, steady motion, he pulled upwards. There was a faint tearing sound, and then the dark splinter slid free from the baby's flesh. It was bigger than he had thought, a jagged piece of wood, almost an inch long. The baby Bigfoot cried out once more, a short, sharp wail, then immediately fell silent, panting. The adult Bigfoot stopped, its rumbling fading into a soft huff. Jerry quickly looked at the wound. A small bead of dark blood welled up, but the splinter was completely out. The skin around it was still red and swollen, but the source of the pain was gone. He gently pressed his thumb over the spot, trying to stop the bleeding. The baby Bigfoot trembled, but then, to Jerry's surprise, it leaned its head against his hand. A tiny, purring sound started deep in its chest. The tiny purring sound from the baby Bigfoot was the sweetest music Jerry had ever heard. It was a soft, rumbling vibration deep in its chest, a clear sign of comfort. The baby, no longer crying, shifted its weight and pressed its furry head more firmly against Jerry's hand. Its dark eyes, once wide with fear and pain, now seemed softer, filled with a gentle trust. Jerry kept his thumb pressed lightly over the small wound, slowing the trickle of blood. He knew it would heal quickly in the wild, but he wished he had something to clean it with, maybe a damp cloth from his pack. But his pack was long gone, left somewhere in the tangled undergrowth where he'd been grabbed. Still, the worst was over. The pain was gone. The adult Bigfoot let out a soft huff, a sound of profound relief. It lowered its massive head, nudging the baby gently with its nose. The baby, responding to its parent's touch, slowly pulled its head away from Jerry's hand. It turned and, with a soft chirp, began to move towards the larger creature. With a little hop, favoring its still tender legs slightly, the baby Bigfoot snuggled against the adult's side. It burrowed its face into the thick, warm fur, its small body seeming to melt into its parent's larger form. The adult Bigfoot wrapped a massive arm around its child, holding it close, a picture of familial love and protection. The baby let out a contented sigh, a soft, sleepy sound, its purring continuing. Jerry watched the tender scene unfold, a lump forming in his throat. He had just witnessed something truly extraordinary, something that defied all human understanding of the wild. He had been terrified, dragged against his will, but it had all led to this moment of connection, of shared relief. He, a human hunter, had helped a Bigfoot. The adult Bigfoot looked up, its dark eyes meeting Jerry's. There was no longer any desperation, only a deep, quiet gratitude. It was a look that spoke volumes without a single word. Jerry felt a warmth spread through him, a feeling far more powerful than any fear he had experienced. He had come into these woods to hunt, but he had found something far more precious. A bond with the creatures he had always considered myths. He slowly stood up, careful not to disturb the peaceful pair. The cave was quiet now, save for the soft purring of the baby and the gentle breathing of its parent. The silence in the cave was profound, broken only by the soft purring of the baby Bigfoot and the gentle breathing of its enormous parent. Jerry stood there, a human in the presence of a legend, a feeling of deep peace settling over him. The adult Bigfoot, its child now safe and calm, turned its head fully towards Jerry. Its large, dark eyes held an expression Jerry could only describe as profound gratitude. Then, the adult Bigfoot made a sound. It wasn't a growl or a huff, but a soft, deep coo, a gentle murmur that resonated in the cave. It was a sound that spoke of relief, of thanks, a sound that needed no words to be understood. Jerry felt it in his bones, a direct communication from one living being to another. It was a thank you. Slowly, carefully, the Bigfoot raised one of its massive arms. Its hand, the same hand that had so powerfully but gently dragged Jerry through the forest, now extended with a surprising grace. Its long, thick finger pointed towards the entrance of the cave, where the last remnants of twilight were fading into night. The gesture was clear. It was time for Jerry to go. A pang of something akin to sadness, or perhaps just wonder, passed through Jerry. He had just experienced something no other human had, a secret shared with the wild, a bond forged in an impossible situation. Part of him wanted to stay, to learn more, to understand these mysterious creatures who lived hidden in the deepest parts of the woods. But another part, the part that remembered his wife and his life outside, knew it was indeed time to leave. He nodded to the Bigfoot, a small, respectful bow of his head. "You're welcome," he whispered, knowing it wouldn't understand the words, but hoping it would feel the sincerity in his voice. "Take care of your little one." The Bigfoot watched him, its large eyes following his every movement. There was no menace in its gaze, only that same deep, quiet gratitude. It had trusted him, and he had delivered. That trust was a gift, something he would carry with him forever. With one last look at the peaceful scene, the sleeping baby snuggled against its parent, bathed in the faint, silvery light filtering into the cave. Jerry turned and began to walk towards the entrance. Each step felt heavy, as if he were leaving a dream, or perhaps stepping out of a myth and back into the ordinary world. But he knew, deep down, that nothing about his world would ever be ordinary again. The Bigfoot remained at the back of the cave, a silent, watchful guardian, allowing Jerry to depart as freely as it had brought him in. Stepping out of the hidden cave, Jerry blinked against the gloom of the forest. The last sliver of daylight had vanished, leaving the woods bathed in a deep, inky blackness, only faintly illuminated by a sliver of moon struggling to pierce the thick canopy. The air outside was colder than inside the cave, carrying the crisp, familiar scent of pine and damp earth. But nothing felt truly familiar anymore. He turned back for a moment, looking at the large, dark mouth of the cave. The Bigfoot remained inside, a silent shadow guarding its child. Jerry felt a strange mix of emotions swirling within him. There was still a residual tremor of fear, a primal instinct warning him of the sheer power of the creature he had just interacted with. But woven into that fear was an overwhelming sense of wonder, a feeling of having touched something ancient and sacred. He had seen proof of a legend, a creature thought to be myth, and had even helped it. His legs felt a little wobbly as he started to walk, carefully picking his way over the uneven ground. He didn't know which way his camp was or how far he had been dragged. All sense of direction had been lost in the frantic journey. Yet a strange calm guided him. He felt as though the forest itself, or perhaps the memory of the Bigfoot's careful navigation, was subtly pointing him in the right direction. Every rustle in the leaves, every snap of a twig made him jump. But it wasn't the same blind terror as before. Now there was a curiosity, a heightened awareness of the life teeming around him. He wondered if other creatures watched him, if the forest held more secrets than he could ever imagine. He kept looking over his shoulder, half expecting the large, hairy form of the Bigfoot to appear, but it remained hidden, a silent guardian of its territory and its family. The path back felt different, imbued with a new kind of magic and mystery. He wasn't just walking through trees. He was walking through a living, breathing world that held wonders beyond human understanding. The experience had peeled back a layer of his perception, showing him a reality far richer and more complex than he had ever known. He was a changed man, carrying the weight of an unbelievable secret and the warmth of an impossible connection. The fear was a dull ache, but the wonder was a bright, shining light in his heart. As Jerry slowly moved away from the cave entrance, his eyes kept darting back, drawn by an invisible thread. He couldn't quite bring himself to fully turn his back on the incredible secret he was leaving behind. The massive form of the adult Bigfoot was still visible, standing just inside the cave mouth, a silent, imposing figure against the deeper shadows within. It watched him go, its large, dark eyes fixed on him with an intensity that Jerry could feel even from a distance. There was no sense of threat, no lingering fear, only a powerful awareness of its presence. It was as if the creature wanted to ensure Jerry was truly leaving, or perhaps it was simply observing its unlikely ally's departure. Jerry raised a hand, a small, tentative wave of farewell, a gesture of respect and acknowledgement. The Bigfoot didn't respond with a wave, of course. But its gaze remained steady, holding Jerry's for a long moment. Then, very slowly, almost as if melting into the surrounding darkness, the enormous creature began to retreat deeper into the cave. Its huge form, which had seemed so solid and real, blurred at the edges, becoming one with the shadows. In a matter of seconds, it was gone. The cave entrance was just a dark void again, the secrets within hidden once more from human eyes. Jerry stood there for a while, staring at the empty cave mouth, trying to reconcile what he had seen with what he thought he knew about the world. It was truly gone, disappeared, just like the legend said. A profound silence fell over the forest, deeper than before, as if the very trees were holding their breath. With a final, lingering look, Jerry turned to face the dark woods. He felt a strange sense of solitude now, a new kind of aloneness. Even though he knew the forest was teeming with life, he was carrying a secret that would forever set him apart. He started walking again, his steps more confident now, guided by an inner compass that felt clearer than any physical direction. The path ahead was dark, but the memory of the light in the Bigfoot's eyes and the purring of its baby lit his way. He was no longer just a hunter. He was a keeper of an unbelievable truth. The moon, now a slender crescent, offered little light through the thick branches, but Jerry found himself moving with an instinctual ease. His feet seemed to remember the way, even though his mind was still reeling from the unbelievable events. He walked for what felt like hours, the cool night air refreshing his face, washing away the last traces of lingering fear. Each step brought him closer to the familiar, yet further from the impossible reality he had just experienced. Finally, a faint, flickering glow pierced the darkness ahead. It was the embers of his campfire, still bravely holding on, a beacon in the vast wilderness. A wave of relief, warm and comforting, washed over him. He had made it back. His truck, a solid, familiar shape, sat patiently where he'd left it. His hunting camp, a simple tent and a makeshift fire pit, looked like a haven. He reached the camp, his body tired, but his mind buzzing. His rifle was gone, his backpack too, but he didn't care. He had something far more valuable than any hunting gear. He had a story, a truth that would shake the foundations of his world, if he ever dared to tell it. Jerry sat by the dying fire, watching the sparks dance upwards into the night sky. He pulled off his boots, feeling the ache in his muscles, the small scrapes on his body. But these were minor things, easily forgotten in the face of what he had endured and witnessed. He looked at his hand, the one that had held the baby Bigfoot's leg, the one that had pulled out the splinter. It felt different, almost tingly, as if it still held the warmth of the creature's fur, the memory of its soft purr. He was no longer just Jerry, the hunter. He was Jerry, the man who had met Bigfoot, the man who had helped Bigfoot, the man who carried a secret that would forever change how he saw the world. The forest, once a place of challenge and solitude, now held a deeper magic, a profound mystery that he was now a part of. He understood that he had been given a rare glimpse behind the veil, into a world that most people only dreamed of or scoffed at. He would never look at a shadowed grove, a rustling bush, or a deep forest trail the same way again. The wilderness had opened its heart to him, and in return, he had given a piece of his own. He was changed, irrevocably and wonderfully. The next morning, Jerry packed up his camp in a daze. The sun rose, painting the forest in familiar golden hues, but the world felt entirely new to him. He drove his truck out of the woods, leaving behind the place where his reality had been turned upside down. When he finally arrived home, his wife hugged him tightly, relieved to see him. "You're late, dear. Everything all right?" she asked, noticing the tired lines around his eyes. Jerry just nodded, giving her a weak smile. "Just a long trip, honey. And I lost my rifle and backpack somewhere deep in the brush. Had to hike a ways." He offered a partial truth, a convenient excuse for his disheveled state. He couldn't bring himself to tell her the whole story. How could he? He imagined telling his wife, his hunting buddies, or anyone else. He could hear their laughter, their disbelief. "Bigfoot? You met Bigfoot? And it dragged you into a cave to fix its baby's boo-boo?" They would think he had gone mad, spent too much time alone in the wilderness. He would become the crazy old man with the wild stories, a joke at the local diner. The thought made a hollow ache in his chest. The truth was too big, too unbelievable for the ordinary world. It was a secret meant for the silence of the forest, a whisper shared between him and the ancient trees. He tried to tell himself that maybe it had been a dream, a strange mix of exhaustion and imagination. But the memory of the coarse fur, the desperate eyes of the parent, the tiny purr of the baby, and the cold metal of his belt buckle against the splinter were too real, too vivid to be anything but true. So Jerry kept his secret locked away, deep in his heart. He would talk about the beautiful autumn colors, the quiet peace of the woods, the deer he almost saw. He would even make jokes about his lost gear, blaming it on a clumsy stumble. But the core of his adventure, the unbelievable encounter, remained unspoken. It became a heavy, precious weight within him, a personal myth that only he knew was real. It made him feel both incredibly lonely and uniquely special, a silent guardian of an extraordinary truth. Even though Jerry kept his incredible story hidden, the experience changed him deeply. It wasn't just a memory. It was a shift in his very soul. Before, he loved the woods, seeing it as a place of adventure, quiet, and good hunting. Now his respect for the forest grew even deeper, becoming something sacred. He saw the trees, the rivers, and the mountains not just as parts of nature, but as guardians of ancient secrets, homes to wonders he once thought impossible. His hunting trips became different. He still went out, but his purpose was no longer just to find game. He moved through the forest with a new kind of awareness, a quiet reverence. He walked softly, listening more intently to the whispers of the wind through the leaves, watching for any sign of hidden life. Every shadow seemed to hold a possibility, every rustle a potential secret. He learned to simply be in the woods, rather than just passing through it. He rarely carried his rifle now. It felt wrong, a tool of violence in a place that had shown him such unexpected tenderness. When he did hunt, it was with a heavy heart, always making sure to thank the animal for its sacrifice. He understood now that all creatures, seen and unseen, shared this earth, and each deserved respect. His eyes, once sharp for tracking deer, now scanned for anything out of the ordinary, a broken twig too high off the ground for a bear, an unusually large footprint, a strange scent in the air. He wasn't looking to find Bigfoot again, not exactly. But he was looking for proof that the magic was still there, that the hidden world continued to thrive. The forest, in turn, seemed to respond to his changed spirit. The air felt cleaner, the bird songs sweeter, the silence more profound. He noticed details he had always overlooked: the delicate patterns on a mushroom, the intricate web of a spider, the way a single ray of sunlight pierced the canopy to light a patch of moss. He realized that the woods were not just a place for hunting, but a place for living, for understanding, and for healing. He had become a protector in his heart, a quiet advocate for the unseen marvels of the wild. Jerry's changed view of the forest wasn't just a feeling. It became something he actively expressed in his own quiet way. On his new, more respectful trips into the wilderness, he would sometimes wander off his usual path, guided by an invisible pull. He wasn't trying to find the Bigfoot family again, not directly. He just wanted to revisit the sacred spot, the hidden cave that held his incredible secret. When he reached the grove, he would approach the cave entrance with slow, careful steps. He never went inside, knowing it was their home, their private sanctuary. Instead, he would leave a small offering. Sometimes it was a handful of ripe berries he'd gathered, sweet and fresh. Other times, it was a piece of dried fruit from his own supplies, a rare treat in the wild. Once, he even left a small, smooth river stone he'd polished himself, placing it gently on a mossy boulder near the cave mouth. He never saw the Bigfoot family during these visits. The cave entrance always remained dark and silent, a mysterious gateway to another world. But each time he returned a few days or weeks later, his offering would be gone. The berries would be nibbled clean, the dried fruit vanished, the polished stone replaced by a fresh, unpolished one, as if to show it had been acknowledged. These small acts of giving were Jerry's way of showing his continued gratitude, a silent thank you that words could never convey. It was a way to honor the trust that had been placed in him, the impossible connection he had formed. It was also a way to reassure himself that the experience was real, that the Bigfoot family was still there, thriving in their hidden world. He felt a quiet joy each time he saw a gift taken, a silent conversation between species, a bond that needed no language. It reinforced his belief that the forest was a place of deep intelligence and unspoken understanding. These offerings became a ritual, a sacred pilgrimage he made several times a year, a secret communion with the wilderness and its most elusive inhabitants. It was a promise to keep their secret safe, and a reminder of the day a Bigfoot dragged a hunter into the woods, not to kill him, but to ask for help. Jerry's secret pilgrimages to the cave, leaving gifts and finding them taken, solidified a simple yet powerful truth in his heart. The initial fear he felt, the image of a monstrous creature dragging him into the unknown, had slowly been replaced by a different understanding. He realized that the things we often find most scary are sometimes just misunderstood. Bigfoot, the creature of legend, was painted as a fierce, wild beast. But what Jerry had seen was a worried parent, desperate for its child. It was a creature capable of immense power, yet it had chosen gentleness. It hadn't attacked him, hadn't crushed him, but had instead sought his help, a clear act of trust and vulnerability. This changed how Jerry saw everything. He began to look at life, and even people, with a new set of eyes. He understood that appearances could be deceiving, and that behind a scary or strange exterior, there might be a simple need, a longing for kindness, or a hidden sorrow. A growl could be a cry for help, a large shadow, a sign of protection. He thought about the many stories he had heard, about scary monsters and wild beasts. He wondered how many of those monsters were just lonely, or hurt, or simply needed someone to understand them. His own experience had taught him that sometimes the most unexpected creatures, the ones we are taught to fear, are the ones who need a helping hand the most. Jerry's life became a quiet testament to this wisdom. He was kinder to strangers, more patient with difficult people, and always respectful of the smallest creatures in the forest. He became known as a man with a gentle spirit, a deep calm, and an almost magical connection to the natural world. He never preached, never told his tale, but he lived the lesson he had learned in that hidden cave. He knew that the wilderness held many secrets, many mysteries still untold. But the most important secret he had uncovered was not just the existence of Bigfoot, but the truth about compassion. Sometimes the scariest things aren't scary at all. Sometimes they're just like us, needing a little help, a little understanding, and a gentle heart. And Jerry, the hunter dragged into the woods, had found that heart within himself. His journey was a reminder that kindness can be found in the most unexpected places, even in the colossal hand of a legend.